the darkness at the door. The first knock was soft, hesitant, like a tentative tap on a library table. I was curled up on the couch, wrapped in a threadbare blanket, staring at the muted glow of the television that flickered with static between channels. Outside, the rain had begun to fall in delicate sheets, tapping against the windows with a rhythm that made the house feel smaller, tighter, as if the walls were pressing in. I froze, listening. Another knock, slightly louder this time. Deliberate. It echoed in the narrow hallway, bounced off the walls, and settled into the bones of the house. My heartbeat jerked, a sudden spasm of panic. I told myself it was just someone knocking on the wrong door, some misdelivered visitor. But the peephole told a different story. I inched closer, barely breathing, and peered through the small lens. Nothing. Darkness. Absolute, featureless black. The house was old, and the hallway was poorly lit even on the clearest nights. The only light came from the dim living room lamp, and it barely reached the front door. I pressed my eye against the peephole again. Still nothing. No shadow, no shape, no indication that anyone, anything, stood on the other side. Yet the knocking continued, patient, measured. It didn't feel human. I swallowed hard, and the wet sound of my saliva seemed deafening in the silence that followed the knocks. My phone lay on the coffee table, a weak beacon of modern safety, but the battery was at 9%. Even if I called the police, would they arrive in time? Or would they see the same thing I did? Nothing? The third knock startled me. Louder now, sharp, almost insistent. My stomach churned. I imagined all the ways someone could have forced the peephole into showing only darkness. Some black cloth, something I couldn't name. My rational mind churned through explanations, each more plausible than the last, but none comfortable. I stepped back from the door. The knocking paused. For a moment, the world was silent except for the rain. Then came a new sound. A slow scratching, low and deliberate, like nails tracing the wooden panel of the door. I pressed my ear against it. It was too steady to be a trick of the wind. Too precise. A shiver crawled down my spine. I fumbled for the lock, checking the deadbolt and chain multiple times. Every mechanism clicked into place, but the sound of knocking and scratching returned immediately afterward. It seemed to seep through the wood itself, persistent, mocking. I tried to reason it away. Maybe a branch, I whispered to the empty room, my voice cracking under the weight of my own fear. But the knocking moved slightly with each beat, shifting positions, as if someone or something was adjusting its stance to observe me. The thought of it watching, waiting, unrelenting, made the air feel heavy and suffocating. I grabbed the kitchen knife from the counter, its cold steel comfortingly familiar. I approached the door, every step cautious, deliberate, trying to calm the tremor in my legs. The knocking paused again. Silence. Then, faintly, a whisper, so soft I thought I imagined it. Open. I recoiled, the knife slipping slightly in my hand. My mind raced. Did the voice come from outside the door? Or from somewhere inside my head? A trick of stress? Isolation? The storm pressing against my senses? I shook my head, but the whisper returned. This time clearer. Open it. I stumbled backward, knocking over the blanket and sending it tumbling to the floor. My eyes darted around the room. The shadows cast by the flickering television seemed to twist in ways that shouldn't be possible, stretching toward the corners and folding over themselves. I could feel them press against my skin, cold, and almost wet. The knocking resumed, a different rhythm now. Not merely taps or raps, but a sequence. 3 short, 1 long, 3 short. Almost like a code. I crouched behind the sofa, holding my breath, counting silently, trying to memorize the pattern. Each repetition deepened the sense of wrongness, a rhythm no human visitor could or would maintain. I thought of leaving, but the front door was the only exit. The rain had turned into a downpour. The street beyond was invisible in sheets of water, and I had no flashlight, no plan. My mind kept circling back to the darkness in the peephole. How could it be utterly black if someone stood there? Even in shadow, even in storm, even with my poor lighting? Then came a sound I hadn't anticipated. Soft, almost imperceptible footsteps, slow, deliberate, pacing from the other side of the door. But the knocking never stopped. Something was out there. Something pacing, tapping, whispering. I pressed myself against the wall, the knife trembling in my hand. My pulse thundered in my ears. Minutes passed, or was it hours? Time became slippery. Each pause in the knocking sent me teetering into panic. Each resumption of the sound felt like it seeped into my chest, vibrating my ribs, rattling my teeth. My hands were numb, my skin prickling with cold sweat. I realized I hadn't thought to check the windows. I went to the nearest one, careful, peering through the streaked glass. Nothing, just the storm. Trees bent and twisted in the wind, streetlights flickering far off, and the rain forming small rivers along the curb. No movement, no shadow, and yet the knocking persisted, patient, insistent, unyielding. I tried another tactic. I grabbed my phone, dialed 911, and whispered my location. A calm voice answered, assuring me someone was on the way. I felt a small measure of relief until the dispatcher asked, "Are you sure the door is locked?" "Yes," I said. It's deadbolt, chained." A long pause. Then the dispatcher's voice, tight, concerned. "I need you to stay on the line. Can you see through your peephole?" I froze. "Yes," I said, voice trembling. "But there's nothing. Just black. Nothing at all." A long, tense silence. Then, "Stay where you are. Don't open it." I agreed, though I hadn't intended to open it. But in the pause that followed, I realized something worse. The knocking had stopped. Silence. Not the comforting silence of absence, but a suffocating, oppressive quiet. My ears rang. My chest ached. And then a new sound. Very close. Behind me. The whisper again, chilling in its intimacy. "Don't look." I spun. The room was empty. The shadows curled unnaturally. But nothing moved. Nothing breathed. Except the storm outside. My hands shook. My back pressed against the wall. The knife clutched so tightly the metal cut my palm. A heartbeat later, a slow, dragging scrape echoed from the doorframe. I lunged forward, peering through the peephole once more. Darkness. Pure, endless black. And yet I felt it, an awareness. Something beyond the door, or within it, staring back, patient and deliberate. The air behind me shifted. My skin crawled. I dared not look. The dispatcher's voice was distant now, warped, muffled, like it came through a wall of water. They're outside. Can you move to a back exit?" I shook my head. My feet refused to obey. I felt the darkness press closer, not from the door this time, but from everywhere. The floor, the ceiling, the corners of the room. The shadows writhed. The air smelled of wet wood and iron, a coppery tang that made my stomach heave. Another knock. Single, deliberate, right on the other side of the door. I pressed my ear to the wood. Another whisper. "Open now." I stumbled backward. The walls around me seemed to pulse in time with my heartbeat. Then, suddenly, the door rattled violently, the frame shaking as if something immense leaned against it from the other side. The peephole remained pitch black. I screamed, but the sound was muffled, swallowed by the storm. I fell to the floor, knife still clutched, tears streaming, unable to decide whether to flee or stay. And then silence. Absolute. The storm outside raged on, rain hammering, thunder rolling. But the knocking, the whispering, the dragging scrape, it all stopped. I dared to look at the peephole one last time. Darkness. Pure, empty darkness. And yet, I knew with absolute certainty something was there. Watching, waiting, patient. And it knew I was aware. I waited. I listened. Nothing moved. And yet, I felt its presence growing stronger, pressing from beyond the door, folding into the walls, into the shadows, into me. I wanted to run, to escape, to scream, but I couldn't. And then, in the smallest movement, almost imperceptible, I saw it or felt it shift behind the darkness. The air changed. The darkness deepened. A shape, impossible and wrong, seemed to press closer. And for the first time I understood, it wasn't just outside. It was already inside. I backed into the corner, knife trembling, and waited for the inevitable. And the door, still locked, still black, whispered, "Now!" Channel 6.7. The apartment was quieter than usual that evening, the kind of silence that seems to settle into the walls themselves, absorbing sound until every creak and whisper is magnified. I was sitting cross-legged on the couch, a mug of half-forgotten tea on the coffee table, scrolling through my phone, when the TV flickered. At first, I thought it was the remnants of a dream. The glow of the screen hesitated in the dim room, a pale, watery light washing over the beige carpet. Then it clicked on, sharply, as if the electricity itself had a mind. I froze. The channel indicator flashed in the corner, 6.7. I had no cable box, no subscription to anything beyond the basic digital feed. I didn't even remember 6.7 existing. The image on the screen was static at first, a trembling mesh of gray and white like snow caught in a wind tunnel. Then shapes emerged, subtle at first. Shadows that moved just slightly out of sync with one another. A hallway, perhaps, barely discernible, or maybe it was a room, the contours of furniture suggested but never clear. A figure? I blinked. The form vanished. The mug trembled in my hand. Heat spread up my arm, though my body refused to relax. I set the cup down too hard. It rattled against the coaster, a discordant note in the otherwise quiet apartment. The TV didn't react to the noise. Continued unblinking. The static thickened, whispering almost imperceptibly. A hiss that could have been the tea kettle cooling or the wind outside. I leaned forward, squinting, trying to find something familiar in the grainy image. That was when I saw it, the reflection. Not on the screen itself, which remained muted and chaotic, but in the faint shimmer of the black glass. Behind me, in the doorway that led to the kitchen, a shape lingered. Slight, human-shaped, impossible to define. My heartbeat lodged somewhere between my throat and my ears. I spun around. Empty. The apartment had not changed. The dull hum of the heater, the faint thrum of distant traffic, the soft rustle of the curtains in the breeze from the half-open window, they were all unchanged. Yet the TV remained, Channel 6. 7 glowing like a portal, throwing light that shouldn't exist into the room. I debated unplugging it, reasoning with myself as if my rational mind could reclaim the night. My fingers hovered over the cord. Then a sound, faint and deliberate, made me stop. Footsteps. Not loud, but precise, the kind that falls somewhere between memory and expectation. They paced just beyond the line of the kitchen doorway. I told myself it was the building settling. I told myself I was imagining it. But my hands were clammy, trembling against my thighs. I sat back down, forcing my eyes onto the screen. The channel had shifted. Static now gave way to something more coherent. A room, dimly lit. The walls were lined with photographs, but I couldn't make out faces. I felt rather than saw them. The gaze of someone or many someones watching me from the screen. The camera in the image moved slowly, deliberately, circling the room as if searching. And then I saw it. A figure, small, crouched in the corner of the room, head tilted, staring directly at me. The angle was impossible. My apartment was empty, yet the reflection in the TV suggested otherwise. I leaned closer. The figure's eyes caught mine. Not in reflection, not mirrored, but directly, intentionally. A cold wash of dread seeped into my chest. My breath caught. I turned, desperate to confront whatever it was behind me. The hallway remained empty, but the shadows in the corners of the living room had thickened, curling toward the screen's glow. Something shifted behind the sofa, slow, deliberate. The subtle distortion of the room, the bending of angles, the faintest pulse in the air itself. It was no longer just a flicker on the TV. It had entered the space I thought was mine. I needed to leave. I needed to run, but my limbs were locked in place, as though gravity itself had decided to weigh my bones differently. The screen pulsed. Static again, and then the room returned, but not my living room. Not mine. The walls were a muted ochre, the furniture unfamiliar. And in the corner, a small stack of objects. A mug, a notebook, a phone. I recognized the items. They were mine. A whisper came then, barely audible, yet clear in the quiet room. "We've been waiting." I jerked my head. Empty hallway, TV unchanged. My apartment, my possessions, everything as it should be, or as it should be for anyone rational. But the voice lingered in the marrow of my skull. A trick of the brain? Perhaps. Yet, when I looked back at the TV, the static had formed a rough approximation of a doorway, dark and waiting, and beyond it, I saw my own living room from an impossible angle, empty, yet somehow moving. I ran to the TV, lunged to unplug it. The cord resisted, stubbornly caught on something I couldn't see. The screen flared, washing the room in white light, and for a heartbeat, I thought I saw myself sitting on the couch, staring back. Then it vanished. Silence. I didn't sleep that night. The TV remained off, unresponsive, dark as a tomb. But when morning came, I found the channel displayed on the screen, 6.7, etched faintly into the glass, like frost that had been burned there by some unseen flame. My reflection in the black glass looked normal. The room smelled of coffee, stale and unbrewed, and the faint trace of static lingered in the air, like ozone after a storm. I convinced myself it had been a dream, a hallucination, my mind playing tricks after too many late nights alone. Rational explanations, neurological misfires, stress. Any excuse to reclaim the apartment I thought was mine. Yet, at night, when the lights dim and the apartment exhales, I swear I can hear it again. A whisper behind the soft hum of the heater, footsteps pacing just beyond the doorframe. And sometimes, in the faint flicker of the TV's black glass, I catch a movement. A shape that shouldn't exist, standing where no one could stand, waiting, watching. I never touch the TV now. I never turn it on. I don't even look at the power button. And yet, every so often, when the apartment is quiet enough to hear the absence of sound, I hear it click to life by itself. Channel 6.7. Static. Shadows. And a sense that the line between the room on the screen and the room I inhabit is thinning, bending, waiting for me to make a mistake. I don't know if I'm still alone, or if I ever was. And tonight, when I glanced at the TV in the corner, just a sliver of the black glass visible through the doorway, the reflection of someone or something was standing behind me. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just watched. Because I know if I do, it might notice. And maybe, then I won't be alone anymore.